we're going to talk about evolution, and you're going to probably figure out what's that got to do with human sexuality and the politics and stuff. But there is evidence for evolution everywhere in your body, from your breasts, and men, you have breasts too, by the way.
Hey, Dr. Ray,
yeah?
could you hold that microphone a little further away? It's a little sensitive, and so it's getting some pop.
Oh, sorry.
A little further away.
Okay, will do. Thanks. I couldn't tell it. The shape of your penis, the shape of your vagina and your clitoris, the chemistry of your semen, and the chemistry of the vaginal fluid. The sounds that, ladies, even the sounds you make while having an orgasm is evidence of evolution. The viscosity of the semen and the composition of the sperm. All of those are evidence of evolution going on right in our bodies. Sex, the sex organs are among the fastest evolving components of almost any organism. Now I'm standing here talking in front of a world-class biologist back there, so if I'm wrong, just ignore me, okay? But there was a fellow named Carl Linnaeus who was famous for creating the classification system that we still use today for many organisms, especially for plants. And what he did, he was accused of being a sex maniac because all he wanted to do was look at sex organs. And this is a sex organ. 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 These are sex organs, and these sex organs are constantly evolving. They're constantly evolving in relation to the temperature, the environment, the insects, the pollinators, the things that might eat it. There's constant pressure on these sex organs to change, to become the most effective at a given point in time for that particular organism. So that's what Carl Linnaeus discovered, was you can classify plants just based on their sex organs. Well, the same is somewhat true for other animals as well. All animals that have sex organs, all sex-based organisms, have some kind of sex organs, and those organs are changing. So if you're a little sensitive to pornography, this is the time to either close your eyes or leave. But we're going to look at some pornography here, briefly. And this is duck pornography, by the way. This is Australian bluebill. Now, the Australian bluebill is a small little duck that has some interesting characteristics. You may not know it, but 97% of birds do not have penises. Only 3% of birds have penises. And most of those birds are waterfowl, the ducks being the primary obvious candidates. For many years, biologists noticed that ducks seemed to have enormous penises. And their penises were corkscrewed. And they couldn't figure out what was the evolutionary reason for having an enormous corkscrewed penis. And I'm going to show you a little bit of just a very brief, this is not an octopus, by the way. It may look like one, but I don't deal in octopus like Pete C does. I deal in duck porn. So I'm going to show you one video, but I'm going to show it to you twice. This video is slowed down 10 times. So as you're watching, imagine this is happening 10 times as fast in the real world.
Gracious, is that a duck's?
Good grief.
Look at that.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me.
Wow, isn't that cool? All right. Watch it one more time, real slow. Slow motion.
Look at that. It's almost 3 inches.
There you go. Duck porn. You never thought you'd come to a humanist talk and watch duck porn, have you? Well,
I could have lived without it.
Like I said, for many years, biologists are trying to figure out what's going on with male ducks. And they had all these theories until a biologist, waterfowl biologist named Dr. Patricia Brennan, I believe out of the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, came up with a revolutionary idea. Let's look at the female reproductive tract. Nobody had ever bothered to dissect the female duck to see, what's going on there. Now, what did she find? Here's what she found. This is the female reproductive tract. That's the male penis. The reproductive tract of the female is actually corkscrewed in the opposite direction of the male. And it has nice little side pockets all through here. Now, this solved another mystery as well. Some of you, well, I know Heman's been to my place. A few of you have been to my house. I live on I love where I live. 7 beautiful acres, wooded all over the place with a big 1.5-acre pond in the front. And I used to have ducks and geese and swans. Until there was a waterfowl holocaust one day when the coyotes found them. Yeah, they had a big meal that night. But that's another story. But what I noticed of these ducks was they were always raping. The males were always raping the females over and over again. I would watch. Now, what I did notice was the female would like a certain male, and she would just waddle around real sexily in front of that male. He would get the hint, and he would hop on. Well, you saw how fast it works. He is on and off in the back of an eye. And the other guys would notice that she was getting, he was getting some, and they would jump on her, and they would rape her. And you could tell she was being raped because the quack was different. She was struggling. She would do anything she could to get away. She would go under the water. She would stay under the water. Ducks would even drown as a result of trying to get away. So it was very obvious these were not welcome advances by the males. But she would have 3 or 4 males on her. There was no way to resist. Other biologists had noticed this for years too and wondered what's going on here. But Dr. Patricia Brennan said, well, let's look at the eggs. Let's find out what is actually going on. And what she found out was that 97% of all the eggs coming from the female were fertilized by the guy she liked. Only 3% of the eggs were fertilized by the rapists. Now, Todd Aiken... Remember, I live about 20 miles from the Missouri border, so I hear a lot about Todd Aiken. We don't get any political ads in Kansas because it's all Republican there, but they all bleed over from Missouri because that's a swing state. So what she did was she did a little experiment. She put the duck's penis in each of these things, and what she found was the duck does pretty well in a straight one or one that's corkscrewed in the right direction for him, but he cannot get through that or that. She can stop males from fertilizing eggs if she doesn't want them in there. So it's a pretty effective way of dealing with rape.
Well,
It is a war, if you will, between the female's reproductive tract and the male's reproductive tract. And there's a name for that. It's called antagonistic coevolution. And we see evidence of antagonistic coevolution throughout the animal kingdom. It's a fight between the sex organs. It's a fight between the gametes of the various organisms as well. Every species, though, has its own mating strategy. And we're going to look at some mating strategies and ask, how does that inform us? What does it tell us about our potential and about our sexuality? Here's a sample of penises from mammals. There's 5 different penises. You can almost look at the penis of a mammal and somewhat guess at its reproductive strategy. Just seeing the penis would tell you something about the reproductive strategy of that particular organism. Here's the spiny anteater out of Australia. He has 4 heads. So if you let the little head think for you, this guy's got big problems, doesn't he? And he ejaculates out of this one this time when he has sex. He ejaculates out of that one the next time he has sex. He alternates back and forth. These 2 heads have no opening, so he doesn't ejaculate. The poor guy, if he's mating with this lady, he is doing it very carefully. This is like the equivalent of the porcupine in Australia. So we can see there's probably a mating strategy. Something's going on there. Evolution is pushing the penis to evolve in that particular direction. And if we could look inside the female, we would probably see the reason for that. I don't have a picture of the internal organs of the female spiny anteater. So what we know is that sex is actively evolving, and it's actively evolving even in us and in the great apes. There are 4 great apes. There's the gorilla, there's the chimpanzee, there's the bonobo that used to be known as the pygmy chimp, until now we know it's not a chimp at all, it's definitely a different species. And then, of course, we've got humans. Now, and among the primates, here's the size of the penises among the 4 great primates. Guess which one belongs to the gorilla? The little one, because size matters among gorillas, but not penis size, by the way. This is the gorillas. This is the chimpanzee and bonobo's penis size, and this is the human size relatively speaking.
Is it
I didn't want to
relative
get
to,
you into pornography,
relative-
just, yeah.
I'm sorry,
What?
relative to his size or actual, you know?
Oh, actual size of the penis.
Okay,
Yeah,
not
the
relative.
gorilla has by far the smallest penis, and it's about the size of a reddish. And is, huh? Half, yeah, even smaller, you're right. So, what we know is that each primate has a sexual style and a sexual strategy. For the gorilla, size matters, but it's body size that matters in the gorilla. The gorilla is what we would think of as a polygamous species. One male dominates several females. They have a high level of sexual dimorphism. Now, the sexual dimorphism is the difference in size between the male and the female. Generally speaking, the more size difference there is between the male and the female, the more the male tries to dominate multiple females. Look at the elephant seal. The elephant seal, is like, 5, 6 times bigger than the female and dominates many, many females. Or cattle. You see a bull that can, have control or try to have control over a number. So, but in the gorillas, the female is quite mobile. The female joins a silverback and may stay with a silverback for 5, 6 years. She gets tired of him, she leaves. I mean, she's not married to the guy. And he can't stop her from going out and finding somebody else if he wants to. So, yes, he tends to dominate a number of females, but part of it is the female choosing this dominant male. So it's a two-sided coin here. If they do have sex, and they only have sex about once a month, it only lasts a minute. In and out. I mean, that's it. If you don't like the way you're getting it now, ladies, the gorilla is not the place to go either. 1¼ inches long, and the testes are half the size of humans, and they only mate during estrus, only when the female is actually receptive, when she's ovulating, when she's ready to be fertilized. So, what we can see in the gorilla is the gorilla has a pretty, quote, traditional way of mating. Now, by traditional, I mean the way almost all the animals that are sexual mate on the planet. Your dog mates in this way. Insects mate in this way. Insects don't go out and have fun screwing around. They only do it when they're ready to actually create eggs. And the same thing for almost all animals on the planet. There are only a few animals that sex takes on other functions. So, for some animals, and for us, sex has been repurposed. How many of you have typed on a computer the last day or two? Virtually all of us, right? Did your hands evolve to type on a computer? I don't think so. Your hands evolved to grasp things, to grasp fruit, to grasp tools, and that sort of stuff. But it didn't evolve specifically for a computer. So we have repurposed our hands to use tools that were unimaginable even a few decades ago. So it's the same thing has happened in our species. We have repurposed sex. Sex now has a different function. But there are other species that have done the same things. So sex has been repurposed for things like creating dominance hierarchies, for creating bonding, for dealing with conflict within groups, and for relieving stress. So at least those 4 things you can use sex for, and it has nothing to do with whether you're going to have a baby or not. Chimps, for example, use sex for dominance hierarchies. 3 or 4 top chimps gather together, get their power together, males, and they dominate the rest of the troop. The top males get most of the sex with the females. Now the interesting thing is, well, that doesn't sound fair, you think, but no, it's really quite fair in this sense. The females want sex with the most dominant males. So males seek sex with any female they want, probably, but the females actually seek out the males. They present themselves. Chimps only mate during estrus. So when the female is ready to, when she's in heat, when she's in estrus, ready to receive, she has a big billboard on her butt that says, I'm there. It's ready. It's ready. And she presents herself, and she tries to get to mate with the highest status male in the troop. So she's seeking out high status alpha males. The lowest status chimps in the troop may not get sex, or may only get it if they sneak off with somebody in the woods occasionally, and rape has been known to happen among chimps for sure. But chimps are a multi-mate species. There's not a one-on-one, there's no monogamy going on there. The alpha males will try to mate with as many females as they want. Females will mate with as many males as they want. So it's a multi-mate, and there's quite a bit of sex going on among chimps. They do have fairly large penises. They're very large testes, double the size of ours, and far larger than the gorillas. They produce copious amounts of sperm. And the females, and the only, I've already said that, males make status alliances, and sex only lasts for about 30 seconds. It's even worse there for the chimps. So we see sex now being repurposed to create dominance hierarchies, not for reproduction. It has very little to do with reproduction. Bonobos. Bonobos are about 10% smaller than chimps, and the female bonobos are about 10% smaller than the males. But among the bonobos, the females rule the roost. A committee of 2 or 3 females, I call them committee, they're probably allies, but anyway, they come together and they control everybody. And in the bonobos, the females leave the troop. When they become sexually mature, females have to leave the troop and find another troop to be in. Males, however, stay with their mothers. So there's a strong mother-son relationship among the bonobos. If any one of these high testosterone, if testosterone gets too big in one of these males, and he gets out of line, starts misbehaving, then the 3 females, who individually are smaller than any of the males, they'll gang up on that sucker and beat the crap out of him if he doesn't obey. So there's an enforcement system. They like lots of peace. They're a very peaceful group, quite unlike the chimps. Chimps can be quite violent, actually. So the bonobos are very peaceful, and they like lots of sex. There's sex every which way you can imagine among the bonobos. There's sex between 2 females, 2 males, between males and females. Probably the most amount of sex that happens in the bonobos is between females, by a small margin. Now, when that female has to leave, she becomes sexually mature. When she has to leave the troop and go find another troop, she has to get in good with the top ladies of the next troop over if she wants to join them. How does she do that? By grooming the top females, and by sexually servicing them, by giving them pleasure. And so you see that from the very beginning of the relationship, it's female to female. In fact, if the female bond is not there, she's probably not going to be invited to stay with the troop. And she has to go somewhere, because it's pretty dangerous in a forest all by yourself. The bonobos, I told you, they love sex. So what happens if one bonobo runs through forest and finds a tree, he or she finds a tree that's got a lot of fruit on it. Well, they jump up and down and holler and scream and say, hey, there's fruit over here, hey, there's fruit. Everybody comes, and the first thing they do is have an orgy. Everybody screws somebody else. And when they're finished having sex, then they climb up in the tree and they eat. If a predator comes through, and everybody's huddled down and scared and worried, when the predator is gone, the first thing they do is jump up, and everybody has sex. When 2 bonobos get in a fight, after the fight is finished, then they fuck somebody. The person they just had the sex with. So there's lots of sex going on in the bonobos. But for the bonobos, sex is used for conflict management and for bonding. It's not used for dominance, to create a dominance hierarchy, quite unlike the chimps. So we have almost opposite sexual styles among 2 primates that are incredibly closely related to us. But both of these primates have repurposed sex in terms of their sexual strategy to do something besides reproduce. The other things, interesting things about the bonobos is they hide their menstruation. It's very difficult to look at a bonobo and tell if she's in heat or not. Whereas, remember, on the chimps, you can tell it really quickly. Bonobos also have breasts. Now, they're size A's, but they're still breasts. And so there's some similarities. Why would an organism hide estrus? I did not know the answer to that question. I thought, dang, this... for years, I wondered, as humans, why do we menstruate, and why do we hide our menstruation? Very few other animals on the planet do that. Until I just happened across a blog by a guy named P.Z. Myers, and he had the full explanation there. I thought, shit, why didn't I know that before? But if you want to know why women menstruate and why we hide our menstruation, go to a blog called Pharyngula and just Google menstruation. It'll probably come right up. I don't know. But thanks, PZ. You answered a lifelong question for me when you published that.
What's the answer?
I will not. I don't have time. But PZ's right here, so maybe you can get him to answer the question. It's actually a very fascinating answer to the question, but I got too much to talk about here. All right. The bonobos have a penis, like we saw earlier, about the size of that pickle. And they have very large testes, the same size, about the same size as the chimpanzee. And they mate many, many times. There will be thousands of sexual encounters among bonobos for every live birth. Sex lasts for 30 to 40 seconds, but you know, doesn't really matter if you're having sex 20 times a day. Yeah, the time may not be as big an issue then. So here's a comic I thought that was quite funny. It's a couple at the zoo, and he's reading a sign. It says here that bonobo societies, females are in charge, and sex rather than violence is used to keep order. And she says, thank God we've evolved. Here is a picture of some bonobos. This is two females having sex. Now, here's two more. It's not very clear. That's the clitoris, you can see. This is a male. Now, I have this fantasy. I'd love to see this. Imagine a creationist homeschool class going to the zoo when there's a bunch of bonobos there, and they're all making out and French kissing and having sex missionary style. And it's two females, or it's two males. That would probably screw up the lesson plan for that day. Might screw it up for that day. Look at that penis right there, guys. Does that look like yours? It doesn't look like mine. We'll come back to that in a minute. The females have a clitoris that's about the size of my little finger. It's enormous. It's actually the size of a small penis. And the females love to rub clitori. I don't know what the plural clitoris is. So they love to rub their clitoris together. And according to Franz de Waal, who's an expert in this area, he says when two females are rubbing clitorises, they have the same kind of look that a human female has when she's having an orgasm. It sure looks like bonobos have a lot of orgasms and enjoy lots of sex. So what we see, as we look at the sex organs of different animals, is we see rapid change in the outward appearance. But just last week, or a few weeks ago, in Science News, there was an article, and here's what the article said. When scientists compared 1,880 proteins encoded by genes from humans and rodents, a number of proteins involved in reproduction ranked among those with the greatest number of changes. 3 are directly involved in sperm-egg interaction. In other words, we don't not only see rapid change happening among the sex organs, we see rapid change happening in the genes themselves, which you would expect. If there's rapid change going on somewhere, it's going to show up externally and internally. It's because I'm forgetting the word for phylogeny and morphology. What's ontogeny? Ontogeny, right? Okay, all right. Anyway, so now let's look at human mating strategies. We've kind of looked at mating strategies from the other 3 primates. And we could ask some questions and answer them. I won't answer all these questions, but I will pose them a little bit. Why is the human penis shaped as it is, and why is it so large? Why does human sex last so long? I mean, our sex, even when it's short, is not as short as some of these you've seen up here. Why do humans have larger testes than gorillas, but smaller testes than chimps and bonobos? Why does human sperm seem to have different kinds of sperm in it? Why do women hide their menstruation? And why is female reproductive tract apparently pretty hostile to sperm in many cases? And why do women have breasts? I'm not going to answer all those questions, but all those questions are available to us to understand through evolutionary terms. Everything we see in our sexual strategy can be found in other species. We are unique, but we're unique in the combination of things we have in our sexual strategy, not in any one specific thing. We can find other species that have penises that have similar kinds of shapes. We can find other species that have large testes, but not as large as others. I mean, we can find all the components. We can find females that have similar kinds of vaginal tracts, but we can't find, there's no other species that has this sexual style that's identical to ours. virtually every species on the planet, all species on the planet, not virtually, every species on the planet, has its own mating sexual strategy. A study I read some time ago looked at 15 different water striders. You know what a water strider is? On a pond, a single pond. 15 different species of water strider existed on the same pond. And when they examined the sex organs of those 15 species, every one of them was different. Every one of the females was different, every one of the males was different. Now they're antagonistic, as we mentioned earlier, antagonistic coevolution is going on. But insects that are apparently to the naked eye, to you and I, who are not insect experts, we would think they're all identical. We think they're all the same species, but they weren't. And you could tell the difference just from their sex organs. Now let's look at another species sex organ. Does this look like anybody's in the room? How about that one right there? Well, of course, this is all a picture of the same guy. And I don't know who it is. I stole it. So what is the deal here? You don't see penis shapes like this. This is an unusual shape for most species. And we did not see this penis shape in any of the other, in the bonobos or the chimps. So something else is going on. And a fellow named Robin Baker decided to investigate this, and he's out of the University of Manchester in England. I don't know why everything's happening in England and Scotland. Probably because George Bush wouldn't let anybody do any research on it. This has all happened in the last 10 years or so. What he said was, let's look at why the human penis is shaped this way and do a few experiments. So what Robin Baker did is he went to the porn shop. He picked up one of those fake vaginas. You know, you can get fake guys, you know that? You get fake vaginas these days. And then he got a dildo. It's about the right size for whatever the vagina, whatever. And he injected sperm. Well, he injected liquid of the viscosity of sperm. Now, sperm actually has several different viscosities. So he tried several different viscosities, and he injected it up into the vagina, and then he took the dildo and he pumped it. And what happened? 80% of the sperm came back out. 80% was pumped out, because this is a vacuum pump right here. When the penis goes in, liquid can flow over it. When the penis comes out, liquid is pulled out by the coronal ridge right there. Now, if you remember our picture of the bonobo, it has a different mating strategy, a different sexual strategy than ours. Our sexual strategy is a pumping strategy. The bonobos and the chimps have a flood amount strategy. That is, inject as much semen as you possibly can and flood the other guy out. Flush him out. That's the flush out strategy of the bonobos and the chimpanzees. So if you can flood the other guy out, you know, they have a lot of sex among the bonobos and the chimps. So somebody's already been in there before me. I got to get rid of his sperm so my sperm has a chance to get the egg. And that's what's going on. That's why chimps and bonobos produce enormous amounts of semen, and they flush the other guy out if they possibly can. But we produce quite a bit of semen, actually. We just don't need to flush the other guy out because we have a pump. Our strategy is to pump the other guy out. Now, you got to sit here and think about that for a minute. The Pope says we're monogamous. Why do we need a pump if we're monogamous? And all I can do is ask the ladies to answer that question. Somebody's been fooling around. You know, there was a study done about 3 years ago. Some Canadian psychologists put the question to men and women alike. How many sex partners have you had? Men had X number, let's say 10. I'm just pulling these out there because they didn't memorize the numbers. And same age, economic class, everything. They held everything the same. Asked the women, how many sex partners have you had? And they'd say 2 or 3. That's face-to-face with an interviewer talking to them. So they changed the conditions then. They went back and they said, okay, take this test in this room, and one of the questions of the test was how many sex partners you had, and you're going to hand it to a live person when you leave the room. So what happened? The men's number stayed the same, 10. But the women's number went up, say 4 or 5. Isn't that interesting? They weren't talking to somebody, they were answering on an anonymous sheet, but they handed it to a real live human being. The third condition they did was they put both groups on a fake lie detector test. Fake lie detector test. And they asked the men said 10. They asked the women said 10. Women said the same number of sex partners as men did if they thought they were going to get caught in a lie. Now, it was a fake lie detector test, but they didn't know that. They just thought, I better tell the truth or they're going to figure this out. So, what we know is there's been a mystery among sex researchers for years. Why do men report so many more sex partners than women do? I think we have the answer now. We know it's socially inappropriate for women to report as many sex partners. And we see evidence of it in the slut-shaming things that constantly come out on the internet. So we see a lot of pressure around that in our own community, unfortunately. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So, here's what we know about the human sexual style. We have a penis pump. We know that sex lasts 4 to 10 minutes. Why does it last 4 to 10 minutes? It takes time to pump that other guy out. We're not flushing anybody out. We're pumping somebody else out. I don't know if there's been anybody in there before me or not, so I gotta pull it out. It takes a little bit of time. Now, it's very pleasurable, and it's probably creating oxytocin and other things that then lead to bonding. So a part of our sexual strategy, of course, is bonding. Longer sex probably creates that. But it does have a reproductive function. That is getting rid of the other guy so I can get the egg. Now, guys, you may have noticed this. Gals, you probably did too. That as soon as the guys finish ejaculating, he deflates, doesn't he? Why does he deflate? You don't want to pump your own semen out. You got to leave it in there. If you pump it out, you don't get the egg. So that's why men tend to deflate as soon as they've ejaculated. They're finished. They're going to get out, and they've done their job. They pump the other guy out, and they put theirs in. So there is some evidence, and I think there's still, I think the jury's a bit out on types of sperm, but there's some evidence. Again, Robin Baker is one of the researchers on this one. But some other researchers out of the University of Pennsylvania have looked at this as well, that there may be different kinds of sperm that actually take on different functions. And I'm not up to date on the latest of this, but it is kind of interesting because it wouldn't be unusual. We see this in other animals, that there's actually sperm that takes on functions like the warrior sperm, the getter sperm. The getter sperm get the egg, the warrior sperm kill the other sperm, and the blocker sperm. We do know that chimpanzees have a very good blocker sperm. They have very good blocker sperm. The chimpanzee creates a very thick coagulant, if you will, just like blood coagulating in some ways. And when the chimpanzee ejaculates into the female, a certain portion of the sperm create a mat that then prevents other sperm from getting through. And we have the same gene. It just doesn't work as well in humans. Our blocker sperm don't work as well, and we don't have a gene that works as well. Now, the cool part about this, remember we talked about antagonistic coevolution. That means both sides are kind of in a war with each other. Well, it's also guys against guys. I mean, I'm pumping you out, or you're pumping me out, and I'm trying to block you, or you're trying to block me. But there's even a fourth thing. Some, in our species, and in other primate species, there's a hormone that actually helps dissolve the block. Isn't that cool? So you can dissolve the other guy who tried to stop you from getting through, and then you can get on with business. So as according to the Pope, of course, we're a monogamous species, but I think there's some evidence, as we've submitted here today, that we're actually a multi-mate species. I would submit to you that you may not know anybody who's truly monogamous. Now, I'm going to put this out to you. What was Jesus' definition of monogamy? One partner for life. That was also Paul's definition of monogamy. How many people do you know that have had one sex partner in their entire life? And if you raise your hand, I'm going to ask the next question. How do you know? Your mom and dad may have said they'd never had sex with anybody else, but you wouldn't know that now, would you? Even among Baptist ministers, the divorce rate is equal to the general population, around 50%. Now, that alone tells you that they're not monogamous. If you're having more than one sex partner in your lifetime, you are not a monogamous person. Now, let's discount if a mate dies and you remarry, which was permitted. Jesus permitted that, as did Paul. But they said it's not a good idea. You should be celibate the rest of your life, by the way. So what we know about humans, I'm getting off track there a little bit, but it's religious, is that sex is for recreation, sex is for bonding, and we will have sex thousands of times for every live birth. And let's count masturbation in there, because that's sex with the most person you love the most, probably. thousands of times you're going to have. Now, if you guys and gals, it's really important for you to masturbate. And I'm going to give you the masturbation lecture here right now. Sex, sperm only lasts for about 5 days, inside the female or inside the male. So you got to keep the pipes flowing. You got to keep the pipes clean, and you got to keep the inventory fresh. So if you masturbate, guys, you're keeping the inventory fresh, and you're keeping the pipes clean, and you never know when you're going to get the opportunity to inseminate and have a baby with somebody, right? So you don't want to have old sperm when you're having sex. You want to have the freshest sperm possible. So anybody that tells you masturbation is wrong is actually, going against your best, not letting you have the best shot at the egg. Ladies, same thing, similar thing is true for you. Women who masturbate are generally sexually more responsive. They lubricate better. They respond to their own bodies easier. And quite frankly, a woman that doesn't masturbate doesn't know her own body very well. How can you expect your partner to please you if you don't know how to please yourself? That's a pretty simple concept. But I've met a number of Catholic ladies that don't understand that concept. I once dated a Catholic woman for only about 4 months. She was great 3 weeks out of 3 or 4 weeks out of every month or two. And then she'd get the Catholic guilt and she'd hit the wall and we wouldn't have sex for a week and then we'd go back to having great sex. One day I showed up at her house and I'd been over her house a number of times. This is back before cell phones, guys. I'm 39, so you can imagine how long and I noticed throughout her bedroom something that had never been there before. She had a crucifix, she had a Bible, she had Mary, she had all this crazy iconography there. So I turned to her and I said, "Where'd all this stuff come from?" And she looked at me and kind of sheepishly and embarrassed and said, "Well, I just can't come with Jesus watching me." All right. So what the Pope wants you to do is have sex like my dog. My dog has a rule. If I talk about her dogs, I got to have her in the picture. This is Sugar. She's the sweetest girl in the world. And the Pope says have sex like my dog does. My dog only has sex when she has eggs ready to be fertilized. My dog's not interested in sex. Of course, she's been fixed, so I don't have to worry about that. But if she wasn't fixed, she would only have sex when she's ready to be fertilized. And that's what the Pope says you should do. The Pope doesn't know diddly squat. What is a guy that's never had sex in his life doing telling us what we can and can't do with our own bodies?
How do you know?
Oh, did I make an assumption there? Well, okay. Maybe I'll draw it there.
Not lately.
Not lately, right. So, I have a prize here. I have a prize for the person that guesses. What is the top porn search state in the United States? Okay, back there.
Utah.
Oh, okay. You get the prize back there. I hope you have a girlfriend because this is really for the ladies. All right. Okay. What's the number 2? What's the number 2 porn search state in the nation?
Florida.
Mississippi. Look at this. Have you ever seen something like that?
No.
Every lady I've ever given it to really, really likes it. So, yeah. Maybe guys like it too. I don't know.
It's Utah.
So Utah and Mississippi. Utah and Mississippi are the 2 top porn search states in the United States. And of course, I think this one's from what's her name? Betty Bowers' website. I think she's great. Here's what Betty said. Thank God. Thank the Heavenly Father for closeted Southern hypocrites. Top 10 states searching for gay sex on Google in the last 12 months. Interesting.
Not Florida?
Not Florida.
No, I guess Florida's not one of them. At least according to Betty Bowers. Is she an expert? I have no idea. So here's the moral of the story, and I'm getting moral here for us for a few minutes. I'm actually quite immoral, according to my Christian friends. But we have allowed Christianity to define sex for us. And that's That's wrong. We should not be, I'm not a Christian. Why should I act like one? We need to define our sexuality for ourselves and not let other people define it for us. I wrote Sex and God for my fourth book. I wrote Sex and God to help people like us look at ourselves and ask, where have we been programmed? We are swimming in a polluted pool, polluted stream, if you will. Our culture is constantly being inundated and polluted with religious ideas around sex and sexuality. And we have imbibed a lot of these ideas, and we don't even question the ideas. I wanted to build a framework in writing the book. I wanted to build a framework for us to look at ourselves as secular sexuals. People who are secular and have secular values around our sexuality. And I didn't see anybody else talking about that at the time. I wanted to celebrate our sexuality as something positive and natural. And so I've also tried to delineate between secular sexuality and Christian sexuality, or Mormon sexuality, or Muslim sexuality. In fact, I see those as very clear sexualities. There is a Muslim sexuality. It has nothing to do with biology. It has nothing to do with human sexuality. But it's still a sexuality. And if we look at it, it's actually very destructive to who we really are as human beings. And I wanted us to, as secularists, to encourage us to be proud and open about our sexuality. And I want to demonstrate that to you a little bit right now. You've heard of Jeff Foxworthy, and you might be a redneck. Well, you might be a Christian atheist. We're going to take that tack for here. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel guilty about masturbating. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel shame about enjoying the fact that you enjoy porn. You might be a Christian atheist if you have difficulty talking to your children about sex and sexuality. You might be a Christian atheist if, whoa. I'm sorry. You might be a Christian atheist if you have difficulty talking to your spouse or partner about sexual fantasies you would like to try. Now, I'm not saying your spouse or partner necessarily needs to participate in your sexual fantasies. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if you can't even tell your partner what your fantasies are and ask if they would participate or enjoy with you, then something's wrong with your communication in your relationship. I think as a fundamental principle of secular sexuality, we learn and know how to communicate with our partner openly. Whether they engage with us or not is a whole other question. But if you can't even talk about it, that is a serious issue. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel disgust around normal sexual activities. If you feel like, oh man, it's disgusting to want to be spanked, but I sure would like to. That's something wrong. That's your problem. And I'm serious. And there's nothing wrong with liking a spanking every now and then. Males and females. I don't care which side of that coin you're on. You might be a Christian atheist if you slut-shame other people for the way they dress, for the way they act, for the way they talk about themselves and their sexuality. And I think I want to underscore that because everything I heard earlier today from Rebecca Watson said that, I just want to underline what she said this morning. I see far too much slut-shaming going on in the atheist community. Women have just as much right to express their sexuality as men do. And we should express it in a healthy way, but in a way that's respectful to the other people and the other gender. Now, I know women can be just as disrespectful as men in some cases, but the water doesn't flow that direction as often. I mean, that just seems to be my observation. So, that's the best or closest you're going to get to a sermon from me today. I'm not as good as Jerry. So, I am not a Christian. And I don't need to act like one. And I see a lot of atheists acting like Christians because they are ashamed of themselves. They're ashamed of their sexuality. They're ashamed of their body. I've got some news for you. It's the only body you're going to get. There's no other direction. So get used to your body. Love your body. That's the best body you're going to get. And you can have a hell of a lot of fun with your body if you just relax a little bit and let yourself be who you are, not who somebody told you should be when you're 5 or 6 years old. So I am a secular sexual, I am a sex-positive atheist, and I'm very proud of it. And I want to throw that out to you to consider today. I want you to think of yourselves. I want you to reconsider what your sexuality is. Whether you're bisexual or homosexual or heterosexual, I don't care about that. But you're still, if you're sitting in this room, you are a secular sexual. You have secular values around your sexuality, and you should be proud of those. And let me give you a little illustration. What I see this far too often, that people act ashamed of who they are or what they've done in the past. How many sex partners have you had? And I know I've seen women who are afraid to answer that question because they're afraid to be slut-shamed, for example. I've also seen people ashamed to admit they had an abortion. Having an abortion is not shame. That's something the religionists have put on us. You need to get used to the idea that it's not a shame to admit who you are and how you've lived your life. And having an abortion is not something that anybody needs to be ashamed of. Now, you may want to talk about it. It may not have been something pleasant. It may be something you did not want to have to do. I'm not endorsing it. What I'm just saying is don't act ashamed of it. And I see far too many people. When people go down, when they put those billboards up, they're trying to shame women. That's what they're trying to do. And the fundamental underlying principle of all religions, and I talk about this extensively in Sex and God, the underlying principle is control of women's bodies. That's what religion is all about. And if we attack religion at its root, and my suggestion is sex is the root of all religion. Religion is a sexually transmitted disease. I am actually dead serious about that idea. Religion is a sexually transmitted disease. If you took religion, sex out of religion, it would all collapse. Imagine the Pope waking up one day and saying, "Whoa, I had a great wet dream last night. I think we'll make masturbation legal." That's not going to happen, is it? Or Ted Haggard saying, "Man, having sex with that male prostitute is great. I think we'll make homosexuality legal." If you take sex out of religion, religions collapse. Only the most liberal religions, Unitarians and such, and Episcopalians, which is Christianity light, only those really have any kind of sex positivity to them, and they are not growing. You have to have sexual shame and sexual guilt in order to grow. So that's, I've been told I'm pretty much finished. I hope you'll take a look at Sex and God. I regret that somebody came here and bought all my Sex and God virus books already. I didn't bring as many of those. So if you're interested, I'll be happy to talk to you about it later. All right, if you've got any time for questions, I'll take
You want to take 5 questions?
5
And
questions.
then if you want to talk more, he's available after the conference. They
Yep.
can pin you down.
Right, all right.
During your sexual exploration, have you ever seen evidence of like circumcision or genital mutilation in other species?
I've never seen it, no. But our biologist friend in the back could probably say that. I don't think they go around cutting each other up. No. Now, there are some females that do rather nasty things to males in the insect world, among other places, but no, I haven't seen that. That's a cultural thing. It's very cultural. And when people say circumcision, we think of it as a single thing, but it's not. There's a lot of different kinds of circumcision, and all of them are bad as far as I'm concerned. But there's different kinds of female circumcision in different degrees, and there's actually different kinds of male circumcision in different degrees as well. It depends on the culture you're in. So, yeah, never heard of it. Other questions? Yeah.
Does circumcision change in any way that pumping action that would remove the other man's sperm?
I don't think so. Just looking at the morphology of it, I can't see a big difference, but I'm no expert there. I wouldn't say, and I've seen no research on that particular piece. Robin Baker may have gone there, but it's kind of hard to get
Was that penis, it
uncircumcised
was kind of
dildos.
fuzzy. Was that a circumcised penis that we saw? It looked fuzzy from this.
No, it was
natural.
not a circumcised penis. That was not a circumcised penis, right? So I don't have the answer to that question. Ask Robin Baker. She's gone there yet. But I haven't seen any uncircumcised dildos lately. Have you? They all seem to be circumcised.
Men make
Yeah.
them.
Can you explain what shift is? You got all book sales go to shift.
Oh. That was my last talk. They were taking care of it. I was in Salt Lake City last week doing the same talk to a bunch of Mormons. And that's why I had Thomas Monson in there. Yeah, that's irrelevant. I just forgot to take that out. I should have modified it. My fault. Other questions? Yeah.
How did kissing evolve?
How did kissing evolve? I have not a clue, but the bonobos sure do a lot of it. Bonobos are very much into kissing, and you know, I've had birds. Birds seem to kind of kiss. Some species of birds seem to touch beaks and stuff. So I don't know. You know, it's a good question.
I just want to comment, there's a book called Kissing, Tickling, and Being Bored, and your question would be answered. I haven't read the book.
Well, thank you. I didn't even know about that. All right. You haven't read the book, so you can't give us the answer? Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Any other questions? Yes?
What's your next project?
Oh. Well, right now, my passion is promoting recovering from religion and getting the secular therapist project up and running. And we actually have one therapist in the room. Do you mind revealing yourself? Thank you. In the back. We have one therapist that is registered in our database. And we'd like lots more. If you know of a secular therapist, tell them about us. If you know somebody or you need a therapist that's secular, go and look first at our website. Even if there's nobody in your area, a lot of our therapists will do Skype counseling or phone counseling as well. So that's where my passion is right now. I'm also passionate about Secular Student Alliance, and I work closely with them. I do a lot of talks for them, and I also do a lot of leadership stuff. If you're a student, I will be talking on leadership stuff at the next convention in Columbus. Yeah, back there. David.
How do you actually define secular therapist? Are you looking for somebody who is openly atheist, agnostic themselves, or just somebody who promises not to prescribe any religious treatment?
The first and some of the second. There's four of us that are all, do you know the fellow Richard Wade that writes for Humanists blog? Richard Wade, I'm sorry, what's the name of his? Ask Richard. He's one of our secular therapists, and we have two others. There's four of us in all, and we're all bona fide secular therapists. We're all atheists. And if you apply, you have to go through all four of us. You have to convince us through your website, through whatever you write, through anything you publish that you are secular. Or if you're still spiritual or something like that, you keep that out of your practice. And we're pretty careful about not letting anybody in. We have turned down 20% of all the applicants. One lady, one PhD psychologist, we went to their website, looked pretty straightforward to us until we dug down deeper, and we found out that she was a spiritual channel as well. So she didn't get in our database. So, David, we try to keep those out. So far, so good. We're very rigid about that. We don't want anybody that's so-called New Age. If you want to align chakras, we're not going to let you in either. Yeah.
But the therapist you're talking about, psychological therapist or sex therapist or both?
Oh, they could be both. Dr. Dick is in ours. You guys know Dr. Dick's sex advice? No. He's a sex therapist and a clinical psychologist, and he's in our database. So if you want sex advice, you want sex therapy, he can do that for you. Yeah, I was on his podcast about a month ago. We had a great discussion. There's nothing like talking to a sex therapist about sex. So get on Dr. Dick's Sex Advice podcast. I was on for a couple weeks there. It was fun talking. I saw somebody over here. Okay, back there.
I just wanted to say, do you recommend Dan Savage's podcast?
I love Dan Savage. I do a little experiment with Dan Savage. I've been a psychologist for 30 years and practiced clinically for 10 and practiced in other ways. But I let Dan's, he has people call in or email. I listen to that and then I shut the podcast off and I think, how would I answer that question? And then I turn it back on and damn, he beats me every time. The guy, he is amazing. I cannot come close to giving, he always seems to have just the right answer. So he is really in a league all his own, I think, in terms of understanding human sexuality. So I got to give that to Dan. Yes, I highly recommend Dan Savage. Yeah, back there.
So, have you ever been married and you don't believe in marriage? Are you married? Do you have an open marriage?
Personally, I've been married twice, and 18 years the first time, 10 years the second time, and I realized I'm not a monogamous person. I never cheated on either wife, but I was miserable as hell. And I finally figured out I'm a poly. I'm just polyamorous. And I admitted, 10 years ago when I admitted that to myself, I've never been happier. I was never this happy when I was married either. And both women were lovely women. I'm still friends with my first wife. I got 2 kids with her. And we're still great friends. We do all sorts of stuff together. Couldn't stay married, of course. But, yeah, I'm not married now, but I've been in the same relationship for almost 5 years with a wonderful lady, and we're poly, and we're very open about it. We're from the first date. First date, I said I'm poly, she said so am I, and that was great. We had a good time ever since. But I'm not saying everybody should be poly. If one-on-one sex for 10 years is fine with you, I'm okay with that. I'm not here to preach and convert anybody. But I do think there's an option there. And as a secular sexual, I have that option. I don't have to act like I'm a Catholic. I don't have to act like a Baptist.
So I just want to explore a little more. I believe, and I'm not sure why, maybe you can turn this around, that polyamory exploits women.
Well,
Because
that's...
of what you said about how society treats women who have been partners. So,
Okay, I don't think this is the
That's a
time.
misconception about poly. If you just look at who's writing the books about poly, 4 out of the 5 top books are written by women. And the first 2 books, Dr. Deborah Anapol wrote the first book in 1987, and The Ethical Slut, I believe, was written in 1997 by 2 women. All the leaders in the poly community are females, not males. I mean, it does sound like, hey, every male's dream, but no. It's not every male's dream. Some men have a real hard time